Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrew Weber. I'm just facilitating this webinar here. You probably heard my voice if you've been on one of these before. If you haven't, welcome. And today we're going to be talking about not just Amazon. We're going beyond Amazon here and really looking at growing your direct sales kind of in conjunction with what you might be doing on Amazon and taking this more larger advertising approach. And there's a lot of great stuff here, and I'm really excited for us to be joined by two folks here who you may have seen before, you may not have seen before. Ian Miller, who's our DSP lead over here at Takeometrics, and additionally Mike over at Taboola, who's the Director of North American Sales. Really excited for both of you guys to be here.
Hi, great to be here. Really excited to get started.
Awesome. So yeah, just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. First off, at any point during the presentation, if a question comes up, something that our presenters are talking about, and you have a question, use that question box on the bottom or side of your screen, depending on what you're looking at this through. And at any time, enter those questions. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation, so you don't have to wait till the end. Additionally, the session is being recorded, so you will get a full replay of this webinar along with the slide deck, roughly 24 hours after the conclusion of this webinar. So stay tuned for that. You'll get that right in your email. And additionally, again, anything, if you have AV issues, anything, just shoot a question and I'll be in the background again, helping facilitate those. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started here. So first, just a quick rundown of the agenda before we get into everything. So first, Mike's going to really talk through how the larger ad ecosystem has changed and how that relates to what we're really going to be talking about, and how your perspective should really change when it comes to retail advertising vis-a-vis some other channels you're looking at. And additionally, then we're going to get kind of the meat of the presentation. Talk about, okay, your Amazon advertising, but think about your D2C set in conjunction with that. Where is that overlap, and how should you be thinking about those two avenues in terms of just boosting your overall business? And getting more into the nitty-gritty details. Okay, if let's say you're taking your Amazon expertise, you've done search-based targeting for a while, what can you do to take that to other channels? How should you adjust so that you're targeting appropriately based on what you've learned, based on what you think your customers are going to be like? And similarly, then we're going to go look at Amazon DSP, which some of you may be familiar with, but you can use it beyond just goals of, hey, I'm going to drive traffic to my Amazon site. So Ian's going to really talk through that, about other ways you can potentially use this, and Mike's got some great thoughts on there as well. There's a lot you can do with this advertising product. And then we're going to kind of wrap up with best practices when you're kind of starting, but really when you're scaling up your advertising efforts, what are the things that you should be doing to really make sure you're getting the most of your money, especially as you're scaling up and putting more dollars there. And as I mentioned, we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the very end, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. So a quick rundown before I hand it over to Mike, just really briefly, if you haven't heard of Takeometrics, we're a technology platform. What we do is we pair our SaaS product with a team of expert analysts if you want that extra hands-on keyboard help. And we've helped thousands of brands, some of which you see here, grow their sales on Amazon and Walmart.com. Again, today we're going to really talk about that Amazon portion, and then Mike's really going to talk about the D2C portion, how those can work together. But we've been doing this for a long, long time. DSP is probably one of the most exciting new products from Amazon out there. So really excited to talk about that in conjunction with what you can do to help your D2C site. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Mike, to talk a little bit about Taboola.
Great, thanks very much, Andrew. First of all, we're very honored to be joining Takeometrics in this webinar today. So thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure working with you, Andrew and Ian, along the way here. So for those of you who are not terribly familiar, Taboola is a platform that powers audience development for thousands of leading digital publishers around the world. We recently just went public so that you can find out a lot of information about us on our website. But for the high level today, as an extension of that service we provide to publishers, we also power exclusive native advertising real estate across their properties. Through that network of leading publishers, many of which you will recognize, I have some examples on upcoming slides. We reach about 165 million daily active users in the United States alone to help complement your tactics across retail media platforms, which we'll review a lot today. And globally, we reach about a 1.5 million or 1.5 billion monthly active users if folks on this call have non-US markets that they serve. So I'll go through some of the top bullet points to take away about Taboola, and then obviously we'll move on to the meat of the content today. So first and foremost, we represent thousands of publishers, so we're one unified source to access a lot of great supply inventory on the open web. Secondly, all of our publisher relationships are direct, meaning that there's no black box going on. We're fully transparent and have the capability to be that way, given those direct relationships. And we're always working very closely with them to develop new placements across their properties and ways to leverage those for brands. And next slide, please, Andrew. In addition to that hard-coded direct integration we have with all of our supply partners means two really big things for us in terms of how we support advertisers. Number one, we're able to proliferate a ton of first-party user data based on that direct exposure to user behavior across these sites. And third, or next, we have the flexibility to play with what those ad experiences really look like, which can help serve goals across the funnel for different brands, something unique to our offering as well. And then lastly, people think of the open web as very expansive. So we have in-suite tools to help ensure the most relevant and brand safe ad experiences for our advertisers. Also, as a value-add service to many, we offer a team of experts to help translate creative strategies from other platforms or to help improve performance of campaigns ongoing with Taboola. And we'll dive into some takeaways from their work as well as we go through. Next slide, please. And then lastly, some most recent news about us. You may have seen we recently signed to acquire an e-commerce platform, Connexity, one of the leaders in the space. So this is, we've announced that recently and looking to close somewhere in the near future. But this is in line with Taboola's strategy to expand into recommending everything everywhere, and effectively doubles our focus on e-commerce as part of that strategy. So I'm going to quickly take you through a little bit of bird's eye view and our perspective on the evolution taking place in digital media, and especially as it relates to retail, which is primarily, for those of you working with Takeometrics, first in focus. And so going back, let's call it 10, 15 years here, and you had the crop up of Google as the primary source of traffic for the average publisher, and they had to worry about algorithm changes at Google. Not too long after that, in about 2013, Facebook took over as the #1 source of traffic for the average publisher. And so this became a bit of a platform war in terms of where users spend time. And so that is true of all the activities you might expect a user to be doing in digital, which could be consuming content, messaging, gaming, and of course, shopping as well. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the entrance of major retail media players, right? It's kind of a new balancing act in terms of where time is spent, how we look at the internet, and especially advertising opportunities on it, especially in light of privacy changes. A lot of those retailers bring with them first-party data that is fairly well protected. So I just want to quickly summarize some of the new entrants, and also where did this all come from? As far back as the 70s or even earlier, right? When you heard the term shopper marketing, you thought about things like in-store displays that you see at the end of an aisle in a grocery store, as that image there on the left. But these days, and for some time, major retail platforms have had capabilities to help brands and marketers address their shoppers in a digital environment, whether that was because of online shopping behavior or because of a process called onboarding, where they took offline shopper data and made it relevant to online campaigns. And so what's happening is, obviously Amazon's a huge player. Walmart has grown tremendously overnight, but there are some quiet players that are surprisingly important in this space and have quite a bit of scale to offer. So Target through their Roundel Media Services, Home Depot, even Walgreens launched a an advertising network recently, Walgreens Advertising Network. And one interesting thing to point out about Walgreens, which we'll touch on later as well, a lot of what's important to publishers, primarily being reach, meaning access to the user, and then yield, meaning a way to monetize their time spent with that user. A lot of those things are equally important to the publisher or to the retail media platform in this scenario. And like I said, they are fairly well positioned from a first-party user data standpoint when they develop a relationship with the end user. But not all of them have significant scale like Amazon, Walmart, or Target in terms of how much time people actually spend on their platforms. And so you'll see a lot of these players are developing their business through what's referred to as audience extension, where you can, using their data, target shoppers, for instance, around the web or across social platforms. And we'll go into some examples of that in a moment. Before we do, and just to give some credence to what I mentioned now in terms of this, coming out of the woodwork of retail media platforms, the left chart here just talks about the growth in this space in terms of total digital spend on what's referred to as e-commerce channel ad spend. And you can see the growth rates are still in this very high growth state right now, and will continue to be for a few more years. Those are estimates as of today. I think this space still has a lot of evolution that we've yet to see, and so I think the rate of change could be even faster than that, or simply more all-encompassing. The reason I say that too is if you look at some of the headlines on the bottom left there, these platforms are very much trying to monopolize more and more of time spent, right? So that's a big driver behind Amazon with their acquisition bid for MGM Studio. And generally, these platforms want to not only offer ways for you to drive transactions in real time based on things like their search products, but they also want to find solutions to their suppliers or brands who are leveraging their platform to reach users to drive, awareness, brand affinity at earlier stages of the funnel. And then the other thing I was going to point out, the table on the right, the fact that Amazon and Microsoft are on the leaderboard for search ad revenue, that's new. I would say, in the past several years, right? And Amazon is already number 2, number 3 digital platform in terms of market share spend in the US. And I think that as more of these other players catch up in their own ways, you're going to see, retail media players represented more and more in terms of where search dollars go and where other digital ad dollars go. And so I want to walk through quick scenarios, use cases of how this works. And many of you, if you're working with Takeometrics today, you're going to be fairly familiar with the on-site portion of what you can buy through Walmart Connect or through Amazon. And so the typical products that a brand like Unilever, P&G, or any of the folks on this call today might be accessing and tapping into, which Ian will go through in a lot more detail a little bit later, but that's things like sponsored products, that's things like display or video that can be served certainly across what's referred to as the owned and operated. So Walmart.com is owned and operated by Walmart. And hit the next button, please, Andrew. And so that portion of this business that I was referring to, though, is audience extension, is where you can tap these platforms and their data on their shoppers to address those users elsewhere on the web, whether that's the open web as we refer to it, or across social platforms, again, where users are certainly spending time. Walmart recruited the trade desk as part of that initiative to really leapfrog that aspect of their business and overall the tech behind their offering. Amazon, which has been in this game a little bit longer, has their own dedicated DSP that they've built and a network of publishers through Amazon Publisher Services. So both serving the same purpose of helping take your campaigns beyond their walls. And then the other option, of course, is whether it's Taboola in question or any other digital media platform out there, there's also the option of engaging with those platforms directly as the brand. And so we wanted to, again, a big part of today's narrative is how do you navigate that as a brand, depending on the channels where you do sell, and depending on the unique opportunities of working with those retail media platforms and or with other platforms directly as well. So simplifying the example here a bit, just looking at P&G working with Amazon, and through Amazon, obviously tapping into those on-site products we mentioned, but also potentially working with Amazon, tapping into their data and engaging users through other inventory. That's represented here, as well as that direct buy opportunity. And if you go to the next slide, I want to talk about in return, what are they trying to drive out of that effort? You know, if it's P&G buying Amazon products, Amazon advertising products, of course, a really big reason for that could be to drive more volume on and through Amazon, whether those ads are served on Amazon.com, another Amazon property, or a third-party publisher, for instance. But at the end of the day, if you're a multi-channel retailer or seller, right, you should be looking at ways to support those channels individually or together. And there's a lot of nuance or flexibility with how you do that. So that's why we're talking through some strategic ways to consider that today. And so for us, we've been able to work with retailers and brands with a D2C operation, obviously to drive that channel for them. We've also been through some creative ways able to help them drive volume in certain retail channels, or in an omni-channel, multi-channel approach to let the user do the picking in terms of where to shop. And lastly, I mentioned before, there's that platform war between, at this point, the open web publishers, social media platforms, and now getting into the mix among other categories of players, retail media. With all that happening in the background, what you're also seeing is that publishers are more and more becoming not only the inspiration for a lot of commerce that takes place, but potentially also the point of sale. Bustle recently announced that their entire site is shoppable. They have a whole section that operates much like a checking cart you'd see on a retailer site, but it's really well integrated into the content they produce. So that moment of inspiration is potentially becoming more and more the point of sale. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this is a trend that essentially the open web and other channels are adopting very quickly from social. The rate of change is what's really interesting. The rate of open web publishers adapting to user experiences, capabilities like this that you would see first on a social platform, or you might see first on a search platform. That's what's really exciting to me. So in looking at social, well over more than 1 in 5 individuals have purchased a product that they discovered on a social platform. Anyone on this call can probably raise their hand and say, I've done that too, or my wife does that all the time, or someone, right? But the other interesting piece, and because this is still such a new capability that social platforms offer, the ability to actually transact without leaving the platform, the fact that of those users, almost 30% have actually made a transaction without leaving the social platform already. That to me is really interesting. That's what you may have heard the term headless e-commerce, or frictionless e-commerce, or discovery e-commerce. It's kind of all wrapped up in this trend that we're seeing. That's true of social. That's where you may have heard it most, but it's also true of touch points that Google powers. It's also true in a very fast moving way, becoming true of the open web as well, where Taboola plays.
Awesome. So this is something to kind of pivoting a little bit to Amazon to kind of talk about some of the challenges with looking at some of the on-channel gripes. I know a lot of you on this call who play in this space. You're probably going to be aware of what this graph is indicating here, but what you're seeing here is most of the traffic is being driven by the top 3 organic results on Amazon. It's in both category search terms and for branded search terms. Those are really what's driving so much of the sales. So really the question becomes, well, how do we get there? How do we drive sales? Because as you're probably aware, on Amazon, sales beget sales. So, you need to figure out ways to, through advertising or through other methods, or advertising on Amazon or advertising on socials or on the open web, like Taboola is talking about, you need to find ways of driving sales on these platforms to increase your organic rank, to drive those sales, to really improve your margins so that you're not driving, so that you can find a balance between your organic sales and your paid sales. Next slide, please. And so again, just think of it like the big thing for us, especially from my vantage point coming at looking at DSP, is saying, okay, how can we circumvent and how can we increase traffic to raise those ranks, right? Like how can we make your customers' experiences frictionless, and how can we increase your organic ranking? How can we drive more sales to the platform? And again, it's not just thinking about sponsored product ads and on-channel ads. It's about thinking about driving more custom display ads on Amazon, off Amazon, and even, again, in the open web, like Mike is talking about, through services like Taboola, to really drive traffic wherever the customers are, and get them to purchase on the platforms that make sense for your business, whether that's a direct channel purchase that's best for your margins, or whether that's an Amazon or Walmart or another retailer to grow your presence on those retailers. Next slide. So yeah,
Great, so,
oh yeah, there you go, Mike. Yep.
No worries. So as Ian was reviewing, there's a lot of, there's consolidated competition within search, especially. That's true of Google. That's true of looking at these retail media platforms as search engines in their own right. And then in terms of stepping beyond that and addressing users in other environments, there are some really key things to take away. One is, once you're outside of retail media or outside of the retail environment, there's a big difference in consumer mindset. And so that all together could mean that you're tailoring your campaigns towards different goals, which we'll discuss in a moment. But it also means that if you have similar goals, such as to drive, to drive ROAS on that campaign, for instance, whether that's through your own D2C channel or through one of the retail media platforms, we need to take those differences into account when it comes to the ad experience for the user, putting yourself in the user's shoes. And then two, not every channel can basically take what you do on search as a strategy. So all those keywords that you have really, complex tactical buys against, it's not always as straightforward as taking that logic and applying it to how you might want to do targeting, for instance, on another platform. And so I'll talk through how with brands we tend to attempt translating those. And then a piece of that is in terms of the benefits of buying directly with the retail media platform versus benefits of buying with another platform directly. With retail media, of course, it's almost a must buy in terms of being present in that down funnel shopper mindset environment. Two, you have access to the user data from those platforms, right? I mentioned that's a big leg up that retail media players have in general, especially those with really dedicated logged in user bases. And so those things are true of retail media platforms, and they can help you address relevant audiences for you both in their walls and out. And then a platform like Taboola, I mentioned the reach we have earlier and the fact that we're hard-coded on publisher pages, so we have really rich profiles about users, both what they're consuming in real time and their interests over time. And so that's just a unique data set. And so there's a huge benefit to tapping something unique like that and finding ways to get the most relevant users for you, which is just a different way of going about it than the way that you're addressing that with retail media platforms. So I'll walk through a couple of examples of that as we go. So next slide, please, Andrew. So at a high level, looking at things very logically or intuitively, if we sell on Walmart and we're trying to keep up the theme of addressing Walmart shoppers, we could do something very simple, and for instance, look at traffic that is reading about Walmart, read about Walmart recently. There's quite a bit difference in terms of the volume of users who engage and read about Amazon versus Walmart. That's to be expected, not only because Bezos just went to outer space, but because they have a larger consumer presence anyway at the moment. But so our platform is capable of getting really granular into brands, products, etc. But the truth is, users aren't always reading about your product specifically or topics related to your product specifically. So we need to find other, perhaps non-direct ways to get in front of relevant audiences. If you go to the next slide, another kind of more specific example, as we look at users who might be kind of in the home goods category, furniture, for instance, when we start looking at something more granular, obviously scale starts to become a question, and we always need to be addressing well, how can we diversify the criteria we're looking at to find the right audiences? Our platform is really helpful at using natural language processing to evaluate similar topics, both logically as well as how we see them interconnected in terms of content that's live on the web. Next slide, please. And so I know a lot of Takeometrics sellers, merchants are also in the fashion vertical. So as you can see here, fashion is and the size of these bubbles is on our network, the relative scale of traffic in those categories. And so fashion is relatively small, right, compared to where users spend a lot of their time, a lot of their attention. And so that certainly means that in that category, we can find audiences that are relevant, in market, etc. But we also have, and I'll show in a slide or two, ways to help you identify other topics that can help you reach a relevant consumer, even if they're not reading an article about the best dress to buy right now, for instance, or anything else. So if you go to the next slide, not every seller has an extensive first-party audience list. Sometimes when you're dependent on retail channels, the user data lives with them. So for anyone who does have an existing D2C operation or audiences, a common tactic for us is what's called onboarding those audiences and then helping you understand, out of the overall readership in the US, where do your users over-index? And so, for instance, we might see with one advertiser, their list of users, those users tend to read a lot more about sports, whereas another advertiser, or perhaps another list from an advertiser, those users, however that cohort's defined, might skew towards other topics. So if you go to the next slide, there's a good example of a women's fashion brand that works with us. And I just wanted to highlight some of those kind of there's a few leaps of logic to get to identifying these users beyond just searching, or looking for users who are actively reading about swimsuits and things of the like. So this is where I was saying, working with each of these platforms, especially these days, there could be very unique opportunities for insights and for different methodologies to help get you in front of the right audience and ultimately grow your reach versus depending solely on the the shopper marketing audiences that the retail media platforms themselves have to offer. And then the other aspect of things, if you remember, I talked a lot about differences in consumer mindset, especially if we're not targeting things that are very, very logically connected to our products. The other big aspect is how is your creative going to change, right? A user searching for a product on Amazon and then engaging with a sponsored product ad there, it's going to be pretty straightforward in terms of expectations. The reason they're there is congruent and all that. With us, when we want the user to make a purchase, for instance, if indeed the goal of this campaign is to drive sales as immediately as possible, and we'll talk through different types of success criteria for different types of campaigns in the funnel in a moment. But I want to point out some very entry-level best practices when it comes to, at least for the Taboola user experience, which is, think of it as users discovering content on the open web. Some very specific best practices always tend to help improve performance. Change words, so things like try, switch, those tend to work well in terms of inciting some intent in the user. The description, which is an optional component in the creative on our platform, and it's varies if it's available elsewhere. So for instance, on social placements, you tend to see that component a lot. Making use of that tends to drive an increase in conversion rate of about 11%. And then again, CTA, or call to action button, really helps to put the user in the mindset and understand the expectation that you have of her if she chooses to engage with this ad. So if it says shop now, that's going to help users self-select as something they want to do right now or not. And go to the next slide. I didn't want to take the risk of making a video play on a broadcast, but imagine that's a dog now running towards you. It's just going to help stop the scroll quite a bit more. But beyond that, we also see the right video asset employed within what otherwise looks like a quote unquote native display placement that can help improve conversion rate another 14% based on our testing. And then as it relates to supporting your channels, your retail channels, we definitely encourage things you see here. Co-branding, you usually have the rights to do so if your products are sold there. That can help kind of reinforce credibility and familiarity with the consumer at that moment of serving the ad. And also another, whether it's driving traffic to retail media platforms or a D2C site, including a price point often helps to set the right expectation to a user quickly recognizes there's something for purchase or consideration. And lastly, depending on the channels you work with, if it's supported, one of the newest things we're seeing is the ability for the user to select the right channel for them. So certainly where the budget comes from or what the goal of a certain campaign is, for instance, could be we want to drive sales of this product on Walmart or this product on Amazon, for instance. But we also know there are initiatives where we want to, again, put that decision in the user's hands and remove some of that friction to purchase if, let's say, that ad is served to a user who shops at Amazon instead of Walmart.
Yeah, so now I think we should talk about kind of like how we determine success really on all of these channels. And really it's more about like how close the customer is to purchase, right? Like there are customers who are kind of in the brand awareness, who maybe are in a, you know, top of funnel, maybe they're not quite in market for your product and you're trying to bring awareness to your brand, you're going after an adjacent market or something like that. Especially again, thinking about like, especially with Taboola, thinking about customers who are maybe in a much wider segment and aren't necessarily thinking about purchasing, you know, not even necessarily thinking about like the direct market. Like you want to be thinking about like, first off, does this match our customer base? And then also like, is this a good, you know, how should I evaluate metric? That kind of targeting, you probably don't want to necessarily think about return on investment right away. You're investing in getting that customer in the loop somewhere, whether you're driving traffic to your .com or a direct retailer like Amazon or Walmart. And it's really down in the mid funnel and lower funnel where you can start thinking, okay, am I getting engagement? Am I getting a good click-through rate? Am I creating a lot of detail page views? What's my CPC look like? Like starting to evaluate, you know, not to say that you're not evaluating cost at the top of the funnel, but really starting to think about what that individual user's cost to you is. And then in the lower funnel, whether they're on or off your platform, thinking about return on investment, thinking about the customers who've become detail page viewers, thinking about customers who are engaged with your brand. You know, those are the ones, once you've gotten the customer down there, you can start thinking about ROAS and driving your incremental sales. But yeah, and again, and then you can compare all of these statistics not only to, you know, Amazon DSP, but also compare these to your other channels, to Taboola, to any other channel. Again, especially using statistics like ROAS, detail page view, click-through rates, CPCs, CPMs. Looking at those kinds of statistics will allow you to be able to compare your statistics across all of your channels. And I do encourage to use as many statistics that you can compare your channels to when you're doing cross-channel advertising. Let's talk a little bit about like thinking about how you could use Amazon DSP specifically to kind of go after broader segments down to driving purchases. Within Amazon and certainly elsewhere, but also within Amazon, there are also custom audiences. You know, again, you can go as high up as lifestyle and even target like people who've recently moved, people who are homeowners, people who are really broadly in categories. And again, all of Amazon's audiences are a little bit more shopper based. Generally speaking, a lot of their first party audiences are most based on shopping behavior. But again, those are fairly broad. You know, there's a leap of logic from somebody who's recently moved to coming in and buying a toilet paper holder, right? Like just to give an example, like there's still a jump. We know that there could be some relevance there. Like, you know, a person who's recently moved may not have a toilet paper holder, but they're not familiar with your brand yet. They're not ready to come to purchase. They're not ready to come home to roost. In markets a little bit tighter, again, the majority of these are Amazon's audiences as well, Amazon's pre-made audiences, and these are customers who are a little bit closer. They're shopping for products, and again, Amazon has a lot of shopping data, and the other retailers do as well, about, you know, how customers are engaging. So these are people who are looking for things like bedding. They're looking for things like bathroom accessories. They're looking for things that like are similar to your products, or even, can get down to, a lot of times we'll even see in market segments that are pretty clearly correlated to your category or subcategory. So again, they're in the market, they may or may not have made a purchase, but they're probably not familiar with your brand. And then your goal then is to drive traffic from those top 2 audiences down to your detail. On Amazon specifically, you want to drive them to your detail page. You can also use Amazon DSP to drive to your direct to commerce site as well, especially if you want to advertise on Amazon and drive them to your e-commerce site, especially if the product isn't sold on Amazon. That's definitely something you could do. But the goal with the lifestyle and in-market segments is to get people to come to purchase, to get them to click through, to get them to become detail page viewers, because then you can retarget them. Then you can close the loop, so to speak. Then you can drive them to purchase. We could get customers who view the product and the lifestyle or in market and could purchase right away. There are customers who will definitely do that, who will make that split-second purchase, but more than likely we're going to need to serve them with more than one ad. And really, if you can get them to become detail page viewers, if you can get them in, then you can show them an ad that's a little bit more focused on purchase, the one that has a direct purchase button, or one that's targeted and optimized towards an audience that is ready to convert. Next slide, please. So as we, from my vantage point, I build campaigns and strategies around that user experience. We start big, and then we get really narrow down to what creatives are we showing, what audiences are we targeting, what creative are we showing a certain audience. There's a lot of the power of Amazon DSP over, let's say, sponsored products, or even there's more capability within sponsored display now than there has been in previous years and months. But even still, there's a lot more customization you have with Amazon DSP to be able to target a specific subsegment and serve them the correct creative. And we'll talk a little bit more about the options for creatives and how to think about your creatives in the next slides. But really, it's about, from my vantage point, it's about developing a strategy where I can optimize towards the goal of, again, each audience, each creative to drive whatever goal, whether it's detail page view up the funnel or whether it's purchases down funnel and retargeting. Next slide. So on this slide are a couple examples of the kinds of ads that are the basic dynamic e-commerce ads. They're fairly straightforward, but even within that, there's a lot of sizes and variety. Again, there's a level of control that we have here that we just don't have in the traditional, sponsored product placement, sponsored brand placements. There's custom images, and again, even within sponsored display as recently as this week, you can add custom images, but there's only a certain number of sizes you can do. There's a lot more customization both on and off Amazon with these ads to show a product review or show the purchase, and again, to appear in different places, both on Amazon detail pages and on the web as customers are out doing other things. Next slide, please. So really, again, this is, again, we're so far just showing the basic Amazon ads, but the reality is even within the ads that Amazon generates, there's a lot of customization for us to show various customers throughout the funnel different types of ads. For example, if you're running a sale, those are typically going to funnel right up to that ad saying, oh, 30% off. We see a lot of traction in DSP for when customers are running deals, or especially in peak shopping windows like Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Everybody's thinking about coupons, everybody's thinking about saving. So if you're running deals in those time periods, or if you're just running deals throughout your normal business, just looking to increase sales and drive traffic, all that stuff circles all the way back up to DSP and shows coupons. You can also show customer reviews, which is an awesome feature that really can help drive traffic. And again, that's also a little bit better for customers who may not be as familiar with your product, who are thinking about or even comparing products. You could also create a custom audience targeting some of your competitor viewers and say, hey, you know what, they viewed and didn't purchase my competitors, but here's a great review talking about why my product's awesome. And you can pull that right from your customers. Then, you work very hard to try to drive sales, to try to get reviews. Amazon DSP actually lets you create an ad using those reviews to try to drive more sales and to try to get more customers interested in your brand. Next slide, please. So again, with Amazon DSP, our goal is to drive your sales to increase your value on whatever platform we're advertising to, whether that's Amazon, which is probably the majority of our customers, but also if you wanted to drive traffic to your direct commerce site, especially again if you sell products that aren't available on Amazon. And again, through us, there's a lot of customization that we can do for you guys, just from basic weekly reports talking about how your performance was at each different targeting level, down to really starting to test and determine, do A/B tests, really get into what specific audiences are converting, how best do we optimize our creative strategy, how best do we optimize our bids, get really into the weeds with how customers are engaging with your ads and your products to drive value, again, wherever they are in the funnel, whether we're looking, optimizing for the best detail page views up the funnel, or again, optimizing towards purchase and driving a positive ROAS for your business, for the advertising to make sense for your margin down at the retargeting level. All that's possible, and definitely something that we spend a lot of times here at TK Metrics working on is optimizing your return on investment and optimizing your, again, down funnel, and then up funnel, optimizing your detail page views to drive that return on investment down funnel, making that make sense for your business and your products and your brand. Quick little seller success story from NatureWise. This is both search and DSP. There's a bit here, especially about search, about how we used it, how the TK Metrics software and our team was able to improve their profitability. And again, they saw an increase, a 4x increase in their return on their ROI, both in search and DSP, which is really awesome. Those are the kinds of stories that really drive me and really inspire me to make to continue to drive, because I love making advertising make sense for your business on whatever platform you're advertising on. But my specialty, of course, is Amazon DSP. But yeah, really awesome story, and again, something we can't obviously guarantee, but that our goal is to have this kind of success story with every brand we talk to, every brand we touch. We want to grow your business and meet your goals. And we can make both Amazon sponsored products and Amazon DSP fit that bill for your brand. Next slide. So just kind of wrapping up. I'll let Andrew do it.
Yeah. So I mean, and feel free to jump in here, but yeah, I think it's beneficial just to kind of sum up what we've been talking about. Both Mike and Ian. I think there's some great stuff in here. So first, I mean, to Mike's point, right, that retail media environment, there's so many more opportunities for you as an e-commerce brand to really leverage what you're doing across these channels. And I think, we talked about it here, but right, I mean, when you're talking scale, you showed it, Mike, in those diagrams, right? There's this huge scale opportunity across the wider web that is inclusive, right? You've got these retail channels, but there's so much more out there. And more and more of these retail brands are going to be taking advantage of that. So you as like even your competitor set, right? You need to kind of be looking at that as a way to kind of keep up with the Joneses, as it were, as you grow. And we talked about this too. I think when it comes to just targeting creative, there's differences that you need to take into account. Mike, I think you talked about this really in conjunction when you're saying like, hey, depending on what your goals are and depending on the channel, right? What do you want to offer those folks when it comes to just options for buying? And I mean, I love this tip around working with platform-specific experts. There's definitely nuances to each of these platforms, so really understanding where those differences are is super helpful and super important. And before we get to questions, right? Okay, we definitely something that Ian chatted about, which was success criteria. When you're thinking about each campaign, what's your larger goal? And that should match, what's your target audience segment? All these things should play nicely together and not be, putting yourself in a position where you have a disconnect really between your goal and who you're targeting, because that's going to obviously impact your overall performance and what you're trying to do. And as Ian mentioned, right, if you have top of funnel goals for campaign, as that campaign goes on, check what the impact is for down funnel, right? There may be some residual impact, and then that can help justify further investment. And I mean, Mike, I mean, feel free to expand on this thing from the Taboola side, but I think, when you look at, folks that have used, you guys, I think there's something to be said about, tracking performance over time and then looking at those, even if your goal was the top of funnel, what's going to be that effect down the line.
Yeah, Ian actually mentioned it as we went through a couple of times. Lift studies or holdout studies, looking at lift over a certain product if you've promoted that specifically, or looking at sales in different markets and a range of what's available reporting wise to either the Amazon platform or whichever platform is in question. We very commonly work with advertisers who have those types of underlying business needs in the background, but we might have an effective cost per session goal on a campaign, for instance, because they know that at that point in the funnel and what they're leveraging Taboola for, both from a targeting standpoint, a creative messaging standpoint, and everything else included, as we mentioned, there's quite an orchestra to make sure is in line here per campaign. Even if we have that proxy KPI in a campaign, at the end of the day, they're making their budget decisions per quarter based on some sort of blended math of how did this actually lift overall sales for us. And so it really does take experts like the folks at Takeometrics to be able to look at that picture with you. And then for us, we're especially on bullet number 2 here, helping to translate existing strategies from other channels to work on Taboola, given the KPIs, given the goals. I like to think our platform is very, very approachable in the sense that these ad units are a bunch of different components put together, but that equally creates a lot of nuance. And so working with us or experts at agencies or with Takeometrics, they can help you navigate some of that, both consultatively, what should the goal be for this certain campaign based on what you're trying to accomplish, and then getting into all the nuances of targeting and creative that should follow that.
That's great. And I think, as we hit Q&A here, I do want to mention the special offer from Taboola, which is just as and if Mike, if you want to go into it, but kind of a special offer for folks here.
Yeah, there will be a follow-up for folks attending here, and anyone who missed it, of course. Just get in touch with our team. There should be a contact link in the follow-up, and essentially we work to help make the process of onboarding with us easy for folks. So if a very basic offer for folks to help them get started is if you spend a minimum of $5K, we'll credit you 20% of that. And excuse me, 1K, not 20% of whatever you actually spend, but that should be helpful for you to get a taste of how campaigns will perform on the platform, what the steps are to set that up, and obviously our involvement throughout that process can just help educate you on how to think about different goals you might be looking to achieve with us. The other thing I'll say, I know that one of the questions that came up so far was just access to these insights, examples of which we've reviewed today. So first of all, again, speaking with our team, we can help really kind of assess what's relevant to you and come up with something that's impactful and actionable. But second, we also have a public portal, trends.taboola.com, where you can see a lot of the changes in total readership. You can see a lot of the actual ad creative best practices that we've identified per vertical. Through that site, there's even a cool tool where you can type in a bunch of potential headlines for your campaigns from a creative copy perspective. And our system will naturally tell you which ones are most likely to engage users better, a predicted CTR of sorts. So there's a range of tools that are publicly facing, and then of course an expert team here that can help you work to get started with Taboola in a way that makes sense for you. And the incentive, the offer for new advertisers is just a friendly way of us helping to make sure it's even that much less of a burden for you.
Great. Okay, so we definitely have a few questions. We've got roughly 10 minutes, so that should be a good amount. I guess the first one, this one will be probably for Ian on this front, but if you can go maybe into more details in terms of what are the differences between Amazon DSP and sponsored display. You talked about it a little bit, but if you maybe go into it maybe at a deeper level there.
Yeah, so Amazon's been working really hard again, and I mentioned it kind of at the top, but I mean, within, like I said, there are new features, I feel like almost every week, it feels like the past couple of months, and Amazon is like, and if you've talked to your Amazon reps, they are really, really working hard to get people to adopt Amazon sponsored display. So the question then becomes, okay, for all of our customers and even for ourselves as we're managing customers, why use sponsored display over Amazon DSP? And the main difference, honestly, is scale. If you have products that, if you have products that are newer to the platform, if you have very limited budgets, if you are a little bit, if you're also a little bit unsure about really starting to go after, concepts like retargeting, going after in-market segments, going after customers who are not ready to, who are not like, I need to buy, going after customers who are not directly targeted at your product or similar products. I encourage everybody to try out Sponsored Display. They've really done a good job over the last couple of months of opening up what's possible within Sponsored Display. Again, you can now add custom creative. The new feature was adding your brand and your logo. They also have put in all of their in-market and lifestyle segments are now targetable, so you can build a mini DSP strategy. And then once you're confident in those audiences, you can scale your budgets up and move them to Amazon DSP, which gives you so much more control. Again, we can target specific creatives to specific audiences in great detail, target the differences between Amazon's owned inventory and open exchange inventory. There's a ton of really finite controls that we have in DSP. It's the most powerful platform and is going to probably give you the best return on investment and the best statistics. But again, it's a bigger platform that you need a budget to scale with. And again, if that's not something that you're confident with, I encourage you to throw a couple of dollars a day at Sponsored Display and start getting familiar with these tactics. It's also great if you are doing Amazon DSP right now and you have new products or products that just don't have the business to support a DSP level budget. Again, throw on Sponsored Display and it'll start building up that audience. And then again, all the brands often ask me, how do I turn my non-hero products into my hero product? That's another way to start that process. You've got a robust DSP strategy for your hero product, but your product that needs a little bit of love, some more traffic, some more unique eyes, start testing on Sponsored Display first. And then once you start to get that traction, shift more budget up to DSP for that product. Hopefully that answers the question. There's a lot of minute differences, but broadly speaking, it's about scale.
Great. This is a good one. And again, folks, if you have more questions, feel free to get them in. I think this is a nice one. And I think this is one where I think both of you could probably jump in here. Some of the examples, right? Larger companies, in the case of some of the ones that Mike, you brought up. So this person said, we're not P&G, we're a smaller brand. Where do you kind of start to build that scale and kind of build your brand? And I don't know if kind of each of you maybe have thoughts around kind of smaller companies kind of using this as a way to kind of build momentum as you go.
Ian, you probably have more of an objective viewpoint on that, so I'll let you start if you don't mind.
Yeah, so as far as like Amazon advertising and looking to scale up to DSP, again, I think that like more than ever, especially with having that intro with Sponsored Display, I think taking using your hero products, coming to Amazon DSP and saying, okay, we want to scale, we want to grow, we want to. But I think the thing that I would kind of caution and think about as like a smaller brand is like, don't like, obviously, with smaller brand, I have been in your shoes. It is about margins. It is about scaling your growth, but don't get too caught up in return on investment right away, or evaluate, as we talked about earlier in the slides, think about each audience and how it provides value. You can go after a great ROAS in retargeting, and that's a great place to start, and it's where a lot of sellers start. That's fantastic, and you should be doing that. But you should also be looking and thinking about the fact that, like with Amazon DSP and even with Taboola, you're going after new to brand traffic that's not familiar with your brand, and that's going to come at a higher cost. The cost of that acquisition is not going to be as efficient as grabbing customers who are so close to purchase, but they just need one more ad to put them across the line. And there's also a scale of incrementality as well. There's some incrementality growth by retargeting customers who haven't come to purchase yet, but that value is limited because if you're not doing it, you absolutely should be doing it, but that next step up, it has so much more incrementality value. Those are so much more, there are so many more new to brand customers out there in, you know, competitor audiences and in market. And again, as I said, with Taboola, like going after, or lifestyle segments within Amazon, like going after customers who are probably in the market for a similar product to yours, but again, aren't even aware of your brand yet. You know, those customers are going to come at a cost, but don't just say, oh, I want to, but I'm also saying, like, don't think about like signing a blank check over to that. Just think about how you can invest in both parts of the funnel. Think about how you can, or in all three segments of the funnel, if you will. Like, think about how much value there is and how you can evaluate that value, right? Look at your detail page view rate, look at, you know, and evaluate your upper funnel that way. And then again, think about your blended ROAS altogether at the end. It's kind of my vantage point, thinking about smaller sellers who are more focused on their margins. That's the best way to think about it. Is obviously retargeting is going to be your bread and butter as far as your return on investment, but that opportunity is there, but it's limited, and you need to grow that pool with more new to brand customers, or with, you know, all your ad efforts need to grow that pool basically. So again, don't sleep on things that don't drive direct return on investment, because Amazon's last click attribution means that, like, if a customer views your detail page view and then searches for your brand on Amazon, that last click is what's going to get credited. Same with retargeting. If they become a detail page viewer and then they get served a retargeting ad and then they come to purchase, the retargeting ad is going to get credited with that sale. So again, don't get too caught up in what's driving a return on investment at the strategy level. Look at each individual KPI and determine the value of it.
Yeah, I was going to say the most surefire way to drive easier ROAS typically is retargeting, but for a small brand, as Ian pointed out, the catch-22 is we don't have a huge pool, depending on, you know, the size of the business that we're talking about. That's why commonly search becomes a first prong of a digital strategy. Depending on the category you're in, that can be outlandishly expensive and not driving a great return anyway, especially if you're new and people aren't familiar with the brand. There could be a lot of people kicking tires, search clicks that you pay for that ultimately don't convert like a Procter & Gamble brand might, given the household familiarity. That's why historically social platforms have been kind of a first stage in a lot of you know, emerging business media mixes, but those platforms are also getting very, very competitive these days too. There's just a plethora of competition. Part of what has impacted publishers over the years in terms of, you know, changes in the newsfeed algorithm on Facebook, changes in where news content lives on Facebook, for instance, an emphasis more on building community within those platforms due to all sorts of macro factors that platforms like Facebook are dealing with. It's creating less ad inventory on those platforms. And so while there's still, you know, tons of time spent, tons of dollars flowing into them, there's not the same equilibrium acting in the advertiser's favor as was the case years and years before. So platforms like Taboola, which, you know, serve in a premium trusted environment outside of social, those have grown, you know, emerging businesses, you know, as a primary driver for growth for them too. It just kind of depends on the product category. So you know, that's where Taboola is in a long list of places where you can extend your reach, you know, in terms of channels available to you. So when you work with us or speak with us, you know, if your category or subcategory is completely out of our wheelhouse, we'll be pretty objective about that. If it's a very good category for us where we've seen a lot of success in the past, then obviously we're more confident we'll play an earlier role in your growth.
Great, and I think we have time for maybe one more question here, and this one I think would be for Mike.
Sure.
You know, kind of, I guess, more forward-looking, but you know, you talked about, you know, retail digital media conversion. You know, this person's asking, you know, do you have a kind of, as you think about these trends kind of continuing, you know, what does e-commerce kind of look like on the open web, you know, 3, 4, 5 years from now? Kind of how do you see those things moving?
No, very cool. So I think there's I alluded to this with some visuals in my overview earlier, and one of the bigger things I see happening is removing that friction in terms of the transaction and really seeing this true version of headless commerce taking place. You know, the publisher interaction with the user is, like I said, very commonly the inspiration for a purchase today, or perhaps part of a research phase. But translating that to the actual conversion event of the purchase, the transaction, I think there's going to be a lot more there. So that could, today users typically click through and read a product page and make a purchase. Tomorrow, a combination of publishers focusing more on logged in users, subscriptions, or simply just access to the first party data through registration, through some trade-off of value with that user. I think that can make it as easy as clicking a button. If my information is already saved, I've made purchases from inspirational content I've read from this publisher before. So I think there's going to be, that's the obvious thing I can see in terms of what we're already seeing is ad experiences that support, remove some of those steps, in the click path to purchase, even to the point where, I can be scrolling down a page about some of the best, button-down shirts for summer, and if I like one of those, I can tap a button and it can show up the next day, right? So I think there's we're morphing towards that as the most obvious thing, but there's a lot of what we're seeing today maybe we wouldn't have even dreamed of a few years ago. So who really knows?
And the only uncertainty is uncertainty in some respects. No, this has been terrific. Ian and Mike, thank you so much. And just to reiterate again, you'll get a replay of this entire webinar along with this slide deck roughly 24 hours from now, along with some of the links that we mentioned here. So thanks everyone on the line for attending. Thanks again, Ian and Mike, and looking forward to seeing you all again on a future webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks.